Get everything ready. Beef, salmon, and chicken wings. That text lit up my phone on Thursday evening. I'm Shelby, 30 years old, and the proud owner of a lake house in Scottsdale. But to my family, I'm just a free private chef and an open wallet. The message from my mother in our family group chat wasn't a question. It was a direct order to throw a barbecue party at my house tomorrow. Before I could even reply, my father's text popped up right beneath hers. Make sure everything is perfect. Don't embarrass us in front of your sister's in-laws. And she simply reacted to his text with a heart emoji. No offer to help prepare. No offer to split the bill. Just a heart. If you've ever dealt with entitled relatives who treat your hard work like their personal property, you know exactly how exhausting it is. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to join our community because you are not alone, and today's story is for you. For 5 years, they have treated my home like a free resort. Every holiday, they show up empty-handed, eat expensive food, and leave me with the massive cleanup and bills. They expected tomorrow to be exactly the same. They expected me to run to the butcher, spend hundreds of dollars, and stand over the hot grill while they bragged to the in-laws. But they pushed me too far this time. So I didn't buy the beef or the salmon. When they showed up empty-handed this time, I had a very different kind of feast waiting for them. One that would change everything. It all started with the housewarming party 5 years ago when I bought this lake house in Scottsdale myself. I handed over the down payment after years of grueling work, sacrificing my weekends and skipping vacations just to save up enough money. I invited my parents and my sister to celebrate my personal milestone. Instead of a quiet dinner, my parents brought a dozen extended relatives and acted like they bought the place. From that exact evening onward, my property was effectively hijacked. It instantly became the undisputed default location for every single holiday on the calendar. Thanksgiving turkeys, Easter egg hunts, 4th of July barbecues, and Christmas dinners were no longer events I could attend as a guest. They became mandatory, massive productions that I had to fund and manage. My mother Marie and my father Carl completely took over the planning process without any regard for my schedule. They never asked if I was available. They just sent out mass invitations to aunts, uncles, and distant cousins, proudly declaring that the events would be held at our lake house. That phrase drove me insane. My father would stand on the back patio holding a glass of scotch, giving guided tours to relatives. He would point out the architectural details and the lakeside view, strongly implying that his financial success made this all possible. My mother would float around the kitchen, accepting compliments on the marble countertops and the spacious layout. She graciously thanked people for praising the house, never once mentioning that her daughter worked endless shifts to pay the mortgage. They spun a massive web of lies, branding my hard-earned asset as a shared family property. The sheer audacity went far beyond stolen credit. The financial drain was astronomical, hidden beneath a thick layer of fake smiles and holiday cheer. Everyone saw the overflowing plates of food, but no one saw the invisible bills piling up on my kitchen island. Hosting these massive gatherings required far more than just buying premium groceries. I had to constantly replace the heavy propane tanks just to keep the outdoor BBQ grills running for their endless supply of burgers and steaks. Because we live in Arizona, the desert heat is relentless. My parents insisted on keeping all the patio doors wide open so guests could mingle easily between the living room and the backyard. That meant my central air conditioning system had to run at maximum capacity, blasting cold air straight into the outside heat for days on end. The electricity bills alone would skyrocket to triple their normal amount during the month of any holiday. Then came the relentless pool maintenance. My sister Bethany always invited her friends to use my pool as a personal resort. They dragged sand, dirt, and spilled drinks directly into the water. After every single holiday, the pool filters were completely clogged. I had to pay heavy fees for professional pool pumping, chemical balancing, and emergency filter replacements. None of them ever offered a single dollar to cover these expensive damages. The exploitation did not stop at utility bills. Because they drank and partied late into the night, they always stayed over. My guest rooms were treated like hotel suites. After every holiday, I spent hours stripping beds, doing endless loads of laundry, and trying to bleach out wine stains from my expensive towels. They ruined linens faster than I could replace them. Eventually, the mess became so overwhelming that I was forced to hire professional cleaning services just to restore the house to a livable condition after they finally packed up their cars. I had to write massive checks to cleaning crews just to sanitize the bathrooms and vacuum the crushed chips ground into my expensive rugs. While I scrubbed floors and balanced my drained checking account, my family did absolutely nothing. They just arrived in their nice clothes, ate the food I bought, drank the alcohol I provided, and took hundreds of pictures. Bethany would spend hours posing by the water in her designer sunglasses, posting photos online with captions about her amazing, luxurious life, while I was inside scrubbing grease off the stove. They treated me like a silent employee. When the weekend ended, they hugged each other goodbye, loaded their vehicles, and drove away. The driveway would finally go quiet, leaving me completely alone in the dark with overflowing trash bags, ruined patio furniture, and a massive mountain of debt that nobody else cared about. Friday morning, right after the text summons from my mother, my phone rang with a call from Bethany. I stared at the screen before swiping to answer. I fully expected a list of last-minute demands, assuming she was calling to dictate which expensive wines I needed to buy, or to insist I prepare specific appetizers. Instead, she delivered something much worse. Bethany didn't even bother saying hello. Her voice came through the speaker sharp and rushed. "Listen to me carefully," she started, her tone dripping with authority. "My husband's parents, Albert and Alice, are coming with us tomorrow. They are very traditional, respectable people. More importantly, they have always thought this lake house was bought and paid for by Mom and Dad." I froze. The phone pressed against my ear, but for a second the room went completely silent. "Are you listening?" Bethany snapped. "Mom and Dad told Albert and Alice years ago that this was their retirement investment. They think they are coming to our parents' lakeside property for a family gathering. You need to behave yourself tomorrow. Do not bring up mortgages. Do not bring up bills. Play along, serve the food, and do not say anything to ruin their mood or embarrass us." She wasn't asking for a favor. She was issuing a command to erase my existence from my own home. She wanted me to act like a hired maid in the very property I broke my back to purchase. For 5 years, I thought my family was just greedy. I thought they were just cheap, taking advantage of my income to save themselves a few dollars on holidays. Bethany's words hit me like a physical blow. This was not just about free food or a free place to stay. They had literally stolen my life's biggest achievement to build a fake reality for themselves. They were wearing my hard work as their own status symbol. My blood ran cold. The sheer level of disrespect was so massive that it bypassed anger completely and settled into a deep, freezing clarity. "Did you hear me?" Bethany demanded again, annoyed by my silence. "I hear you perfectly," I replied. My voice was completely flat. "Good. Make sure the grill is clean. See you tomorrow," she said, and the line went dead. I slowly lowered the phone. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I walked across the quiet living room and stopped in front of the stone fireplace. Resting on the center of the mantel was a small, silver-framed photograph. It was a picture of me taken exactly 5 years ago. I was standing right here on the patio, holding a set of keys, looking exhausted but incredibly proud. I had worked grueling double shifts and skipped countless vacations to earn those keys. That house was my sanctuary, my ultimate reward for absolute discipline. I stared at that younger version of myself in the frame. I realized how much I had let her down. I had allowed my family to trample over my boundaries because I desperately wanted to keep the peace. I had paid thousands of dollars out of my own pocket, hoping that eventually they would appreciate my generosity. I hoped that one day my mother would look at the massive spread of food and say a simple, "Thank you." I hoped my father would acknowledge my financial success instead of using it to impress strangers. I hoped my sister would treat me like an equal instead of a personal servant. Looking at that photograph, the truth finally snapped into brutal focus. That thank you was never coming. They didn't respect me. They didn't even view me as the rightful owner of my own life. To them, I was just a convenient tool, a ghost funding their luxurious facade to the outside world. Pleading with toxic people only gives them more power. You cannot reason with individuals who feel completely entitled to your sweat and blood. Right then and there, the endless endurance finally snapped. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, calculating determination. The rules of engagement changed in that exact second. They wanted a memorable barbecue to impress Albert and Alice. They wanted to play the role of wealthy, generous hosts at my expense. I decided I was going to give them exactly what they asked for, but entirely on my terms. Early that afternoon, I dragged a heavy plastic storage bin full of financial records from the past 5 years out of the closet. I dumped the entire contents onto the center of my home office desk. Stacks of bank statements, credit card bills, and faded store receipts spilled across the dark wood. I pulled up a chair and started sorting through the mountain of paper, determined to uncover every hidden cost. I refused to leave anything out. I pulled every single invoice associated with their holiday invasions. I found the receipts for the massive propane tanks used to fire up the grill. I located the invoices from the professional cleaning crews I had to hire after they trashed my floors. I dug up the emergency maintenance bills for the pool filters they clogged with dirt. I even found the credit card charges for the vintage champagne Bethany demanded last Christmas, and the replacement costs for the expensive patio furniture my father carelessly broke. Each piece of paper represented a moment they used me. I opened a blank spreadsheet on my laptop and began typing. Row after row, the expenses piled up. I spent over 2 solid hours meticulously logging every single dollar they had extracted from my bank account. I didn't estimate anything. I logged the exact totals right down to the pennies. When I finally hit the AutoSum button at the bottom of the column, the final figure flashed on the bright screen. It wasn't a neat, rounded number. It was brutally exact, and it was entirely mine. $79,843. $79,843. Staring at that massive number made my stomach drop. I printed out the detailed spreadsheet along with clear copies of the most damaging receipts. I placed these documents into several sleek black presentation folders, snapping them shut. The undeniable proof of their exploitation was now neatly packaged and ready for delivery. Next, I grabbed my car keys and drove straight to the local supermarket. Normally, on the day before one of their visits, I would head directly to the premium butcher counter. I would spend hundreds of dollars buying thick cuts of ribeye, expensive salmon fillets, and gourmet sausages to satisfy their demands. Not today. I walked right past the glowing meat displays and headed straight toward the cheapest produce bins available. I grabbed a dozen ears of whole corn and tossed them into my cart. I added a few handfuls of wrinkled zucchini, some basic green bell peppers, and a cheap carton of plain mushrooms. On my way out toward the registers, I picked up a few loaves of dry discount bread. I wasn't doing this to be frugal. I didn't care about saving a few bucks on groceries today. I bought these specific items because I made a silent vow right there in the checkout line. I was never going to waste another single cent on these people. Not a dime. They wanted to pretend they owned my property to impress the in-laws, so they were going to get a feast they actually paid for, which meant absolutely nothing. I drove back to the lake house and carried the flimsy grocery bags into the kitchen. My housekeeper Martha was already there, wiping down the countertops. Martha had been working for me for 3 years. She had seen the chaotic aftermath of my family's parties firsthand and knew exactly how they treated me behind closed doors. She knew the reality of this house better than anyone else. I set the cheap vegetables on the cutting board and placed the stack of black folders right next to them. I looked Martha directly in the eye and explained exactly what was going to happen tomorrow. I instructed her to chop the vegetables and grill them plain. No special seasoning, no expensive oils, and absolutely no meat. I told her to serve them exactly when the guests expected the premium barbecue to arrive. Then, I handed her the black folders and walked her through the final step of the plan. She nodded silently, understanding the assignment completely. I didn't need to yell, and I didn't need to throw a fit. The trap was set perfectly, and all I had to do now was step back. At exactly 11 o'clock on Saturday morning, 3 heavy SUVs rolled into the gravel driveway of the lake house one after another, but I had already left long ago. I was sitting comfortably in a quiet coffee shop 20 miles away, but I didn't miss a single second of the performance. My security cameras caught every movement, and Martha later filled in the exact conversations. The vehicles parked and the doors swung open. My father, Carl, stepped out first, immediately straightening his shirt and looking around with the puffed-up pride of a billionaire welcoming guests to his estate. My mother, Marie, followed closely behind, already adjusting her designer sunglasses and projecting the image of a wealthy, relaxed hostess. Then the in-laws emerged from the third vehicle. Albert and Alice stepped onto the pavement. This was their very first time visiting the property, and they carried themselves with quiet, polite dignity. They were traditional, respectable people who valued honesty and hard work. They looked around at the pristine landscaping, the sparkling water in the distance, and the massive stone exterior of the house. Albert smiled warmly and walked straight toward my father. He extended his hand for a firm handshake. "Carl, you have truly outdone yourself," Albert said, his voice carrying clearly across the yard. "This property is absolutely magnificent. You must be incredibly proud of this investment." Albert walked to the edge of the deck, admiring the private boat dock. He spoke about how difficult it must be to maintain such a pristine waterfront property, and my father simply nodded along, accepting the unearned praise without a single ounce of guilt. My father didn't hesitate. He didn't stutter, and he certainly didn't correct the misunderstanding. He gripped Albert's hand confidently and smiled. "Thank you, Albert. It took a lot of hard work, but Marie and I always wanted a special retreat for the family. We are just happy we can share our success with you today." My mother chimed in, offering a fake, humble laugh. "Oh, it's just a little weekend getaway, Alice. Make yourself completely at home. Our house is your house." The level of deception was flawless. They slipped into their stolen roles so naturally it was sickening. Bethany and her husband quickly joined the group, acting as the perfect secondary hosts. Bethany hovered over Alice, making sure she had the best seat in the shade. She aggressively adjusted the patio umbrellas and fluffed the outdoor cushions, desperate to look like she belonged to this level of wealth. She guided her in-laws toward the back of the house, eagerly showing off the custom deck and the expansive view of the lake. The trap was heavily disguised by the perfect summer atmosphere. The weather was flawless, the lake was perfectly calm, and the backyard was fully prepared for a luxury gathering. Martha stepped out onto the patio wearing her crisp uniform, holding a silver tray loaded with ice water, expensive cocktails, and fresh lemonade. She smiled politely and served the guests, playing her part with absolute perfection. No one questioned where I was. No one asked why the actual owner of the house wasn't there to greet them. In their minds, I was probably just running a quick errand or hiding in the kitchen, silently doing the dirty work as usual. My absence didn't bother them at all. In fact, it made their charade much easier to maintain. In the corner of the yard, the large stone barbecue grill was already roaring. Martha had ignited the charcoal exactly on schedule. Thick, fragrant smoke drifted across the patio, filling the air with the unmistakable scent of a summer cookout. The heat radiating from the grill set the perfect stage. Everyone took their seats around the large outdoor dining table, clinking their glasses together in a joyful toast. The conversation flowed easily. They laughed, they complimented the furniture, and they eagerly discussed the upcoming meal. My father loudly promised Albert that the premium beef cuts and the fresh salmon would be hitting the grill any minute now. They sat there in total comfort, their stomachs growling in anticipation of a massive, expensive feast, completely unaware that the real owner of the house had already pulled the plug on their entire fantasy. At 12:30, Martha pushed the metal serving cart out onto the breezy patio. The heavy wheels rumbled against the stone floor, instantly drawing the attention of everyone sitting around the large dining table. conversation naturally stopped. The guests leaned forward in their chairs, their stomachs growling in anticipation, fully expecting to see massive platters of premium beef and perfectly glazed salmon. Carl tapped his fork against his plate, acting like a hungry king waiting for his feast. Marie gave a wide, practiced smile to Albert and Alice, gesturing proudly toward the approaching cart, as if she had spent the entire morning cooking the meal herself. Martha stopped the cart right at the head of the table. She reached out, grabbed the handles of the large silver domes covering the main platters, and lifted the lids in one smooth motion. The heavy silence that followed was absolute. There was no steak. There was no fresh seafood. There were no expensive sausages. Instead, resting directly on the luxurious serving dishes were piles of cheap, plain vegetables. Wilted, burnt slices of zucchini sat next to pale, boiled corn on the cob. A mound of dry, unseasoned mushrooms was pushed to the side, accompanied by a few pieces of hard discount bread. The visual contrast between the elegant tableware and the pathetic meatless spread was incredibly jarring. For several agonizing seconds, nobody moved. The in-laws Albert and Alice stared at the platters with polite confusion. They didn't complain, but their eyes immediately darted toward Carl, silently wondering if this was some strange joke or just a very underwhelming appetizer. Carl sat frozen. His wealthy host persona evaporated instantly into the warm desert air. His face turned a deep red. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He stared at the shriveled zucchini in horror, realizing his facade was crumbling in front of his important guests. Marie's fake smile completely collapsed. She gripped the edge of the table, looking around frantically. Then Bethany erupted. She slammed her hands flat on the table and shot up from her chair. Her sweet daughter-in-law act vanished. She pointed a manicured finger aggressively at the metal cart. "What is this?" Bethany shrieked, her voice echoing loudly across the water. "Where is the main course? Where is the beef? Where is the salmon?" She didn't wait for an answer, turning her sudden rage directly toward Martha. "This is completely unacceptable. Where is my sister? Go inside the house and tell Shelby to bring out the real food right now. Stop playing games and fix this humiliating mistake." She was screaming, completely losing her mind over the lack of a free meal entirely, forgetting that Albert and Alice were sitting right next to her watching her meltdown. Martha did not flinch. She did not raise her voice, and she did not try to argue. Having dealt with my family's incredible arrogance for 3 years, she knew exactly how to handle their sudden tantrums. She didn't offer a single excuse or try to educate Bethany on her terrible manners. She simply stood her ground, maintaining the perfect posture of a professional employee following strict orders. Let Bethany scream. Let Carl sweat in his expensive shirt. Let Marie panic. Martha remained completely detached from their chaotic family drama. She purposefully let the awkward, humiliating tension stretch out over the patio for a few more seconds, allowing the in-laws to fully absorb the bizarre, unhinged behavior of the people claiming to own this massive estate. When Bethany finally paused to take a breath, Martha made her move. She calmly reached over to the table and picked up an empty crystal water glass. In her other hand, she held a silver fork. She stepped back from the angry group, raised the glass, and tapped the metal fork lightly against the rim. The sharp, clear sound easily cut through the remaining noise on the patio. The sheer formality of the action forced everyone to stop talking and look directly at her. Bethany glared. Carl wiped nervous sweat from his forehead. Albert and Alice watched with narrowed, highly cautious eyes. Martha cleared her throat, looked directly at the furious family members, and delivered the exact words I had written down for her. "I was asked by Ms. Shelby to deliver a message to everyone." Martha placed a black folder on each table, then slowly read the exact words from the paper in her hand. "I was asked by Ms. Shelby to deliver a message." She began, her voice steady and professional. She looked down at the crisp paper. "From today onward, if anyone wishes to use this lake house, the total cost will be shared equally among all attendees. If you do not agree to these terms, please feel free to find another location." The patio fell completely silent. Albert narrowed his eyes, the friendly demeanor he had displayed earlier vanishing instantly. He slowly turned his head and looked directly across the table at my father. "Carl," Albert said, his tone dropping to a dangerous whisper. "What exactly does she mean by that? Is this house Shelby's?" Carl completely froze. The color instantly drained from his face, leaving him pale and terrified. He opened his mouth, but only a few pathetic, stammering syllables came out. Heavy drops of sweat formed on his forehead. He looked desperately toward his wife. Marie jumped in immediately, her voice pitched unnaturally high as she frantically waved her hands to dismiss the situation. "Oh, Albert, please do not pay any attention to this nonsense." Marie laughed, a strained and grating sound. "Shelby is just going through a dramatic phase. We simply let her handle some administrative paperwork for our property, and now she thinks she runs the place. It is just a silly misunderstanding." Bethany aggressively pushed her chair back, desperate to save her crumbling status in front of her in-laws. "Exactly. My sister is just having a childish tantrum. Let me go call her right now and fix this mess. Please just ignore her." Albert did not listen to their frantic lies. He simply reached out and pulled the thick black folder toward him. He flipped open the heavy cover. Alice leaned in closely beside him, her expression hardening. The very first document inside the folder was a property tax record. Right at the top, printed in bold black ink, was my full legal name. Not Carl. Not Marie. Albert slowly turned the page. He stared at the massive electricity bills from the previous summer months. He flipped to the next section and found the detailed invoices from the professional cleaning companies. He turned another page and saw the endless grocery receipts from premium butchers and expensive liquor stores. Every single document was legally bound to my name, paid by my credit cards, and pulled from my personal bank accounts. Then Albert reached the very last page. I had printed the master spreadsheet summarizing the 5-year total of their exploitation. His eyes scanned the columns of draining expenses and landed firmly on the final bolded number at the bottom right corner, nearly $80,000. Albert closed the folder. The soft thud of the cardboard hitting the glass table sounded louder than a gunshot. He did not yell. He did not throw a furious fit like Bethany. He simply looked at my father with a level of absolute crushing contempt. "You let your own daughter pay for all of us," Albert said, his voice slicing through the tense air like a blade. "You sat here drinking her alcohol, eating her food, and you let her foot the bill for years. And worse, you looked me in the eye and lied to my face about owning this estate." Carl tried to reach out across the table, his hands trembling violently. "Albert, please, you have to let me explain." "We are leaving," Albert announced, cutting him off instantly. He stood up, adjusting his suit jacket with cold precision. Alice stood up right beside him. Her face was completely stoic, and she deliberately avoided making any eye contact with Bethany. The in-laws turned their backs on the table and walked straight down the driveway toward their vehicle. They did not look back. They did not say goodbye. The heavy car doors slammed shut, and the engine roared to life. Within seconds, their SUV disappeared down the road. Carl, Marie, and Bethany were left standing completely frozen on the patio, trapped in the crushing, suffocating silence of their own public humiliation. Late that afternoon, while I was sitting in a coffee shop 20 miles away, my phone screen continuously lit up with missed calls. The device vibrated so violently against the wooden table that I finally had to turn it face down. But the notifications kept pouring in without a single pause. Dozens of frantic text messages, furious voicemails, and aggressive emails flooded my inbox in record time. My parents were completely losing their minds. Carl sent a string of heavily capitalized texts demanding I return to the lake house immediately to fix the catastrophic mess I had created. He accused me of destroying his reputation in front of important people. Marie left a hysterical, rambling voicemail crying about how I had humiliated them on purpose and ruined the family name permanently. They were desperately trying to regain control through guilt and intimidation, but the damage was already done, and the severe real-world consequences were hitting them incredibly hard. The fallout was brutal, rapid, and permanent. Martha sent me a brief update later that evening confirming that the in-laws never came back to the house. Albert and Alice completely lost all trust in my family. The elaborate illusion of wealth and generosity that my parents had spent years carefully building was shattered into a million irreparable pieces in a matter of minutes. The in-laws were deeply disgusted by the sheer manipulation and financial abuse. Within a few hours, Albert formally canceled the massive joint family vacation they had planned for the upcoming winter. He sent a very brief, incredibly cold message directly to Carl, stating that his family preferred to keep a strict professional distance moving forward. Bethany was in a state of absolute, undeniable panic. Her entire position within her marriage relied heavily on the fake prestige my parents had projected. Now her husband's family viewed her as nothing more than a deceitful, entitled opportunist. Her elevated status crumbled overnight, and the respect she desperately craved vanished entirely. She sent me a vicious, unhinged voice note sobbing and screaming that her in-laws were refusing to speak to her. She blamed me entirely for her collapsing marriage, refusing to take any accountability for her own greed. I listened to her screaming for exactly 5 seconds before pressing stop. I didn't feel a single ounce of guilt. I didn't feel angry or bitter anymore either. I simply felt entirely detached from their chaos. Sitting there with my untouched coffee, I picked up my phone and began the final necessary step of my plan. I went directly into my contacts list. I blocked my father's number. I blocked my mother's number. I blocked Bethany. I went through and blocked their social media accounts, their emails, and every possible avenue of communication they could ever use to reach me. I initiated absolute, total no contact. The moment I pressed the final block button, the endless vibrating stopped. The screen went completely dark. For the first time in 5 long years, the heavy, suffocating anxiety that usually accompanied my family's presence simply vanished into thin air. People might wonder if I regret walking away from that massive financial loss. I know perfectly well that I will never see a single penny of that $79,843 again. They will never pay me back, and I am certainly not going to waste my energy dragging them into a messy, prolonged legal battle. But honestly, I do not care about the money anymore. Because today, I took back something infinitely more valuable than a high bank balance. I took back my peace of mind. I regained the ultimate right to decide exactly who is allowed to step foot into my life and my home. I finally understand the hardest lesson of all. Kindness constantly exploited is a terrible tragedy, but learning how to set firm boundaries is true liberation. You cannot buy freedom, but sometimes you have to walk away from a toxic investment to save yourself. Thank you so much for listening to my story all the way to the end. If you have ever had to cut off toxic relatives to protect your own sanity, I really want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Stay strong. Protect your peace, and I will see you in the next video.